or other oppressed groups, such as women or racial minorities, LGBT people, can go in the ballot box and mark a ballot and can feel that, that's the party that sort of pays attention to them. But underlying that, and has always been the case, is that the Democrats' true nature is as of a party of big business, what we would call a socialist, a capitalist party. And it means that they're constantly forced to attack their base, thereby undermining their own support. Right? If working people end up opposing a health care reform bill because it's going to cut their Medicare, or because it's going to tax their health care benefits after Obama promised to do neither of those things during his campaign, and if the people who are actually in favor of health care reform, and I'm talking about the Democratic version of it in the Congress now, can't even convince anyone that there's a tangible benefit for them, and not one that starts in 2014 or 2019, then the Democrats shouldn't be surprised if their base refuses to vote for them, or that independent voters desert to the Republican side. Now, if there isn't an alternative, and here's what I want to switch over to kind of the topic of Obama and the left. If there isn't an alternative to the Democrats coming from the left, and it can come in many forms, whether it be a third-party challenge, a strike, a social struggle, or even unions or some other organization of working people or the oppressed standing up and saying, we're just not going to take this anymore and we're going to organize against it, then opposition to Washington, quote unquote, falls by default to the right. So what do we do as the left to provide that alternative? Now, the first thing I'd like to argue is that we have to dedicate ourselves to campaign for, embody, and build that political alternative. Now, that may sound obvious, but it isn't when most people who consider themselves on the left support, whether enthusiastically or grudgingly, the Democratic Party. If this last year has shown us anything, it is underlined yet again what Malcolm X said in the 60s, that he warned people, don't put the Democrats first, because the Democrats will only put you last. For years, we've heard the same excuses. The Democrats couldn't do anything for working people or oppose the war in Iraq, despite the fact that most of them supported the war in Iraq. But anyway, they couldn't do anything to oppose the war in Iraq when they were in the minority in Congress. So therefore, they had to get the majority in Congress. In 2006, they won the majority, largely on discontent with the Iraq War. Bush then went ahead with Democratic support in Congress for the surge in Iraq. At the time, the Democrats said, well, our hands are tied. We can't do anything without the White House. So next year, Obama wins the White House in a landslide. And what happened? He continued the Bush bailout of the banks, with demanding nothing in return from the banks. He included and continued and actually escalated, in some cases, many of the war on terror type policies that Bush started. And he escalated the war in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And now the Democrats are really out of excuses. The work of those of us who actively are trying to build a political alternative to this big business party has really never been more important than it is today. There's no use waiting around for Obama or the Democrats to do the right thing, and there's no use listening to people who counsel us that we can't protest the Democrats or the administration because it's only going to give fodder to the right, or because it's going to embarrass a politician that supports us on this, that, or the other. We have to not listen to those excuses anymore. It's also that we have to conceive of politics, with quotes around it, as something that goes far beyond the electoral calculations of these professional politicians every 2 years. What's needed more than anything is activism and mobilization that blows open the narrow political space where anything progressive is associated with Obama and the Democrats, and opposition therefore falls to the right and the conservatives. Now, there is some good, now, don't want to just leave it all gloom and doom, because there is good news to support on these fronts. Just a few days ago, in an answer to the Massachusetts election, voters in Oregon overwhelmingly passed 2 referenda designed to raise taxes on business and the rich. As a result of this, the drastic cuts that have been planned in spending on schools, health, and other vital services of the states won't happen. And on a small level, I think this shows, and by the way, it was a grassroots campaign that actually made that happen. And it wasn't just the kind of liberal areas of the state, such as Portland, that carried the day. It actually got a lot of support in the more conservative areas of the state as well. So I think on that small level, it shows that if people are actually given an alternative, a clear alternative, and not a choice between two politicians that are bought by both the same corporations, that are both bought by the corporations, they will support the right choice. The National Equality March in October marked the emergence of a new generation of activists who are unwilling to listen to any more lip service from Democratic politicians and unwilling to wait for their rights to be delivered for LGBT people. There are, right now, as we speak, there are thousands of students, teachers, and workers in the public school systems throughout California, from the elementary schools up to the University of California, that are organizing to protest the state's draconian cuts, and they are planning walkouts and strikes on March 4th. And it's something that actually people here at the University of Wisconsin could help them by sending solidarity messages along to them. Just a few months ago, grad students at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana struck and won a victory from an administration that said it wouldn't negotiate with them. It was determined to oppose concession on it. In fact, the student workers won everything that they asked for. And in December, Ford workers voted down a concessionary contract that the company and the union had wanted to foist on them. Now, all of those struggles are fragile. They're definitely, like as Will said, they're not what's needed yet to confront the real challenges that face us. But they provide a foundation for further organization, to pressure the government to respond to the progressive majority and not to the loud right-wing minority. And of course, I can't leave you here tonight without noting the insight of Howard Zinn, for whom this forum is dedicated. I mean, his knowledge of U.S. history and his own participation in many struggles throughout years had led him to some firm conclusions. One was that the really critical thing, this is a quote I think in an interview with Socialist Worker, he actually said this, the really critical thing isn't who is sitting in the White House, but who is sitting in the streets, in the cafeterias, in the halls of government, in the factories. Who is protesting? Who is occupying offices and demonstrating? Those are the things that determine what happens. And another was embodied in what he told the New York Times columnist Bob Herbert. If anybody hasn't seen it, they should go read Bob Herbert's column today about Howard Zinn. He said, if there's going to be change, real change, it will have to work its way from the bottom up, from the people themselves. That's how change happens. And I can only add to that that's really the kind of change that we can all believe.